My name is Emily. This is the story of a woman named Margaret Thompson, a mother whose life was filled with love, hardship, and quiet courage. Margaret lived in a small, sleepy town in England with her only son, James. James was 10 years old, full of curiosity, imagination, and kindness. To Margaret, he was everything. Her world revolved around his laughter, his small victories, and even his tears. Every morning, she woke before sunrise, prepared warm porridge with a drizzle of honey, and placed it carefully on the table for James. She brushed his hair, tied his small coat tightly around him, and kissed his forehead. "Good morning, James," she whispered softly. "Eat well, and remember to be kind today." James, still sleepy, would smile and mumble, "I will, Mama." Margaret worked long hours at the town market, selling fresh vegetables and fruit. Her hands were often raw from the cold, yet she smiled for everyone, greeting each passerby politely. The income was modest, barely enough to pay rent and buy food, but Margaret never complained. She told herself, "James deserves the world. I will give him everything I can." The market was bustling, and every day, Margaret carefully arranged her produce: bright red apples, golden pears, leafy greens that had survived the frost. Children often lingered by her stall, looking at her neatly stacked vegetables, and she would offer them a small taste, a carrot or a plum, with a warm smile. When James returned from school, Margaret would listen intently as he told her about his day. Sometimes he spoke of adventures in the woods, sometimes about a mischievous friend in class. Margaret would laugh softly, squeezing his hand and telling him, "Every day, you grow braver, stronger, and wiser." In the evenings, she would prepare a simple meal. They would sit together, and Margaret would make him laugh with small jokes or funny stories. Afterwards, she would tell him tales of faraway lands, castles surrounded by forests, brave knights, wise kings, magical creatures, and secret treasures hidden in caves. James' eyes would widen with wonder, and Margaret felt a deep joy in giving him imagination, hope, and love. One winter, James became ill. At first, it was a cough, then a fever, then weakness that frightened Margaret. She tried home remedies, warm teas with honey, thick blankets, hot compresses, but nothing helped. Concerned, she took James to the local doctor. The doctor examined him carefully and said, "Mrs. Thompson, his condition is serious. He will need proper treatment, and it will not be cheap." Margaret's hands shook as she held James' small hand. She looked into his tired eyes and whispered, "I will find a way, my love. I promise." With no money saved, Margaret borrowed from neighbors, sold a few precious belongings, and even went without food so that James could eat. Nights were long and sleepless. She stayed beside his bed, holding his small hand and whispering, "You must fight, James. Mama is here. You will get better." Some evenings, when the house was silent, Margaret would allow herself to cry quietly. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she refused to give up. Her love for James was stronger than any fear or fatigue. Her neighbors often watched her devotion and tried to help. Mrs. Cartwright, an elderly woman, said, "Margaret, you are giving too much of yourself. You must rest, or you will fall." Margaret shook her head. "I cannot rest while he suffers. My life is his life. Everything I have is for him." One particularly harsh night, James whispered, weakly, "Mama, I'm cold." Margaret removed her own coat and wrapped it around him, holding him close. She hummed softly, a lullaby she had sung since his earliest days. "Hush now, my darling, sleep tonight. Mama is here, and all is right." Outside, the snow fell silently, covering the town in a blanket of white. The world seemed cold and merciless, yet Margaret's love burned brighter than any winter chill. Days passed, and James' condition worsened. Margaret's body grew weak. She barely ate, barely slept, but she never showed despair. She focused all her energy on caring for James, tending to his every need. A local charity heard of James' illness and raised money to help. A doctor in the city agreed to treat him, but the hospital was far. Margaret had no means of travel. Determined, she sold their small home and hired a carriage. During the long, bumpy journey, she stayed awake all night, feeding James tiny sips of water, wiping his forehead, telling him stories of enchanted forests, heroic knights, and magical creatures to distract him from his pain. James' eyes sparkled for brief moments, and Margaret's heart filled with hope. She whispered, "Hold on, my love. Soon, you will be well. I promise." When they arrived, the doctors immediately took James inside. Margaret waited outside, shivering, heart pounding. Hours felt like days. Finally, a doctor emerged. "He's stable, but very weak," the doctors said. Margaret fell to her knees, tears streaming freely. "Thank God, thank you," she whispered. Weeks turned into months. James slowly regained his strength. Margaret, however, became frail. She hardly ate, hardly slept, but never complained. She smiled for James, hiding her exhaustion, and whispered each night, "No matter what, I am always here. You are my heart, James." Margaret returned to the market, carrying baskets heavier than her own strength should allow. She walked through the biting cold, arranging vegetables, chatting with townspeople, and ensuring she provided enough for her son. She often carried extra fruits or small treats home for James, saving them for when he came back from school. As years passed, James grew taller, stronger, and wiser. Margaret continued her sacrifices quietly, refusing to let him notice her frailty. Sometimes, he would see her pale face and say, "Mama, you should rest. You're working too hard. I must care for you." Margaret said softly, "That is my life. You are my heart, my everything." Margaret also taught James small lessons about life, how to help neighbors, care for animals, and appreciate the simple joys of the world. She showed him that love and kindness mattered more than wealth or comfort. The day James left for university in London arrived. Margaret carefully packed his belongings, wrapping each item with care, almost as if preserving pieces of his childhood. She hugged him tightly as he whispered, "Mama, I will make you proud. I will never forget your sacrifices." Tears flowed down Margaret's cheeks as she held him close. "You already make me proud, my love. You already do." That night, Margaret sat by the window, gazing at the city lights in the distance. Her body ached, and her heart felt heavy from years of struggle, but a quiet peace filled her. She had given everything to James. She had sacrificed her youth, her comfort, her health, but she had filled his life with love, hope, and strength. As snow continued to fall gently outside, Margaret whispered softly to herself, "Every sacrifice, every tear, every sleepless night, it was all for him. My heart, my life, my love, all for James." She closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that her love had shaped her son into the man he was meant to become. The world outside could be harsh, cold, and unforgiving, but the love between a mother and her child was a force no hardship could conquer. Margaret sat in quiet reflection, remembering the years of struggles, the nights of worry, and the moments of pure joy that James had given her. She remembered the first day she held him in her arms, feeling his tiny heartbeat against hers, and the countless nights she stayed awake, praying for his life. Every ache in her body, every tear shed, every sleepless hour had been a testament to the depth of a mother's love. And as the first light of dawn touched the rooftops, Margaret felt at peace. She had lived a life full of hardship, but also full of love, a love that would forever live in James' heart. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, comment, and share.